If you enjoyed watching the last video on how to argue, you won't want to miss out on today's video, as I teach you the basic structure that you'll need to win in an argument. Now this video is just part 1 on validity, soundness, and strength. But in part 2, I will go into more depth on how to use this knowledge to win in an argument. Before I distinguish the two types, I'll go over the anatomy of an argument. An argument has at least two parts, one or more premise and a conclusion. The conclusion is the claim or the statement that you're making, and the premise or premises are the explanation or evidence you use to support the conclusion. Now I'll get into two kinds of arguments you can use to gain control of any discussion or disagreement you may be in. The two types of arguments are called deductive and inductive. A deductive argument is simple. It's clear and it's black and white. The words I want you to remember for distinguishing a deductive argument from other types are the words valid and sound. It's likely that you've heard people use the words valid and sound when talking about arguments, but it's also likely that they were used in the wrong way. If an argument is valid, that means that if the premise or premises are true, the conclusion is guaranteed to be true as well. Here is an example. Premise 1. All dogs are reptiles. Premise 2. No reptiles speak English. Thus, here comes the conclusion, certainly, and you'll hear words like certainly, definitely, undoubtedly in a deductive argument. Certainly, no dogs speak English. You see how if these two premises are true, there is no situation logically in which dogs could speak English, so it is a valid argument. However, if I changed the first premise to some dogs are reptiles, it is logically possible for some dogs to speak English, so the premises no longer guarantee the conclusion to be true, and thus it's no longer a valid argument. Now, if I changed the second premise instead of the first to some reptiles speak English, the same effect happens. Now you might be thinking, Tim, how stupid can you be? Mammals can't be reptiles, and reptiles don't speak English. But you need to know that the word valid doesn't mean the same thing as true. It just means, as I said, that the premises, if, and in logic I can't stress the word if enough, if true, guarantee the conclusion. An argument can also be true but not valid, which is what happens when the premises are true and the conclusion is true, but the premises don't actually guarantee the truth of the conclusion. It just so happens to be right. An example would be if we replaced the first two premises of the original argument with the premise 1 as geese are birds, and premise 2 as some geese are young. See how while each part of the argument was true, the conclusion wasn't made true by the premises. This means it wasn't valid, but it was true. Remember when I used the word sound at the beginning of this video? This word is used for an argument that is both valid and true. Like this. Premise 1. Dogs are mammals. Premise 2. No mammals are reptiles. And conclusion, no dogs are reptiles. This is sound because it is both valid because the premises guarantee the conclusion to be true, and it's also true in general. Now, moving on. The second type of argument is an inductive argument, as opposed to the deductive argument we were just talking about. An inductive argument follows the same structure of premises and conclusion, except instead of using language like certainly, definitely, or undoubtedly, you would use language such as likely, probably, or the evidence suggests. While the goal of a deductive argument is to prove the truth of something, the goal of an inductive argument is to show the high likelihood of something. Instead of calling an inductive argument sound or valid, like before, we call it strong or weak, with its strength being determined by how convincing the premises make the conclusion out to be. I'll give an example of a weak and a strong inductive argument. Here's the weak one. Premise 1. I woke up to my dog barking this morning before work, and conclusion, therefore I probably don't need to set my alarm to wake up on time tomorrow morning. A simple way to tell if an inductive argument is strong or weak is to make an educated guess on whether the premises make the conclusion above or below 50% likely. The reason the example I gave was a weak inductive argument is because the premise gave the conclusion less than a 50% chance of being true, arguably, because just knowing that my dog woke me up in the morning is not enough to know above a 50% chance that the same thing will happen tomorrow morning. Now for a strong inductive argument. Premise 1. My dog has woken me up by barking every day this month. And conclusion. Therefore, my dog will probably bark loudly sometime tomorrow as well. This time, the premise gave the conclusion more than a 50% chance of being true, arguably. Now I want you to learn to argue using this knowledge, and as I said, there will be a part 2, but I don't want you to go just yet. Want to hear more argument tips? Check out the playlist to keep watching, or check out another video to feed that brain of yours, and subscribe to never miss out. You're watching Freedom Thinks with Timothy Rogers. See you in the next video.